Nudging is something that everyone knows about. And no, not that kind of nudging. This kind of nudging. But also that kind of nudging. Hang on, I'll walk it back. Nudging in this instance refers to nudge theory, which was formalized in 2008 in the book written by Richard Thaler, an economist, and Cass Sunstein, a legal scholar. Nudge theory can also be called libertarian paternalism or choice architecture, and I'll get into that. But for now, think of nudge theory as taking advantage of human flaws and bias to push people towards a certain decision, preferably a good decision that's beneficial to the decision maker. A good example is illustrated by Thaler and Sunstein in the beginning of their book. Carolyn is a director of food services for a city school system. She wants to determine if she can change the choices of the students simply by moving the locations of different food items. Like if she moved the desserts to one end of the line or in an inconvenient location, would that make students less likely to pick it and more likely to pick healthier options? She implemented different food orientations in each school cafeteria and soon realized that she could greatly impact the degree to which a certain food was chosen. The important aspects of nudge theory to pull from this example is A, no food items were removed. The choices were the same at each school, and the students' freedom to choose whatever they want did not change. The nudge in this case is to encourage students to eat healthier foods. So it's a positive nudge. The authors then go on to recognize how this technique could also be utilized to maximize the profits of the school by putting more expensive items in the more obvious locations. This would be more of a negative nudge. Anyone who's gone to a grocery store has seen small items that are placed in the checkout lane to tempt people to grab them before they check out. This is another example of implementing nudge theory. The purpose of nudge theory is to push the decision maker towards a certain decision, but knowledge of nudge theory can also arm the decision maker with the capability to ensure they are making a decision that they truly want to make, free of nudging or bias. So let's get into this. First, I will describe what exactly nudge theory is, along with common human biases that can be utilized to nudge people. I'll then describe research that takes advantage of nudge theory for engineering decision makers in order to optimize the decisions made by the design team. And I'll end by describing useful implementations of nudge theory. First of all, Thaler and Sunstein give a formal name to nudge theory, and that is libertarian paternalism. The libertarian part meaning that people are free to choose, and the paternalism meaning that the people guiding the decision maker towards a certain decision have the best interest of the decision maker at heart and want to nudge them towards making better decisions. Through that title, the purpose of this nudge theory is clear, but the question of when and how to use it arises. To understand this, Thaler and Sunstein go into discussions of human biases and how they can be leveraged to nudge people's decisions. First, how people think when they make decisions can be better understood through a division of people's brain into two systems, the automatic system and the reflective system. The automatic system is described as uncontrolled, effortless, associative, fast, unconscious, skilled. So the decision your brain makes to dodge something that comes flying at you is automatic. High-level athletes can also be described as using their automatic system since the sport is so ingrained in their minds. The reflective system is described as controlled, effortful, deductive, slow, self-aware, rule-following. This can be described as when someone is learning to do something like play an instrument or a sport. That person needs to think about their every action until, with enough practice, that action becomes part of their automatic system. This understanding leads into how people can be nudged towards certain decisions. Biases that can be taken advantage of involving the automatic system can include the status quo bias, temptation and mindlessness, and priming. Biases that can be taken advantage of involving the reflective system can involve heuristics, framing, and the influence of other people. Let's start with nudging the automatic system. The status quo bias is fairly self-explanatory. If people see something as the status quo or default, then they are more likely to go with that option. So a company putting in a default option for 401k contributions counts as a form of nudging. The person is free to choose whatever contribution they want, but the default value is what the company recommends to best benefit the employee. In this case, the employer would be the choice architect. The choice architect is the entity setting up a decision-making situation for a decision maker. Their goal is to architect the decision situation in a way that nudges the decision maker toward a certain choice. Temptation and mindlessness extend from the status quo bias. People are tempted by options that are more easily accessible. Going back to the cafeteria example, having a healthy food be more accessible can lead to students picking that and moving on. Extending from that is mindless choosing, which is essentially your brain working on autopilot. This can happen for situations which are routine. Utilizing defaults, tempting options, and options that are capable of falling into a mindless choosing routine are options available to a choice architect. The choice architect can even be oneself. If you wanted to work out more, but you find it difficult to motivated to go all the way to a gym, you could architect your own decision making by putting a weight set near your desk. The option will be easily accessible, tempting, and may eventually become routine and mindless. The last bias is called priming. This is influencing people's thinking by preparing or priming them with a certain thought process. This is best understood through examples. One is simply if you're collecting a survey, you can influence people's responses by the available options. Another example that Thaler and Sunstein call out is a study that determined that people become more competitive and less cooperative when surrounded by objects that you would expect to see in a business environment, like briefcases and boardroom tables. Yet another example is a study that saw an increase in car sales by simply asking 40,000 survey takers if they intended to purchase a new car in the next 6 months. These are all great examples of priming. Now, let's move on to nudging the reflective system. Many people use certain heuristics when making decisions in order to simplify the decision situation. Many of these heuristics are spelled out by Tversky and Kahneman in their article on the matter. One example of this is anchoring an adjustment. When people make a decision, they will often start from a certain point and move in the desired direction. One example is trying to determine the population of a nearby city. Without firm knowledge of the city, one is likely to utilize the population of a place they are familiar with and adjust in the direction they believe to be appropriate. For choice architect, setting an anchor can be a method to nudge decision makers in a certain direction. Another example of a heuristic is availability. More recent experience that is more available and present in someone's mind are more likely to influence their decisions. These nudges take advantage of the method in which people utilize the reflective system. Another method to nudge the reflective system of someone's brain is framing. Framing is all about how a decision situation is worded or framed. If you went to a doctor to get a recommendation and the doctor said that an operation has a 90% success rate, you are more likely to think highly of that operation than if the doctor said the operation has a 10% failure rate. The situation is the same, the data is the same, but the wording can lead to drastically different decisions. The final method is utilizing the influence of other people. People have a powerful effect on other people. It is well established that people will often follow the crowd and do what others do, even if they don't necessarily know why. This can be utilized to encourage people towards or away from decisions of others depending on the framing. The other is the spotlight effect, which is essentially if you do something that deviates from what others are doing, it puts a spotlight on you. This spotlight effect can dissuade decision makers from certain decisions. Being aware of how people can influence each other is important for a choice architect when creating a decision situation. A great example that utilizes nudges that affect both the reflective system and the automatic system comes from a journal article that examines people's willingness to divulge private information based on their perception of a social norm. The test subjects for this study were told that a new social media site was being developed that would provide suggestions to users about what they were going to post. Users were then shown one of two series of pictures that people post on the site. The set on the left is the R-rated set, and the set on the right is the PG-rated set. There are two pairs of pictures, two PG and two R, that are common to both sets. This is establishing a status quo by priming the user with an expectation of the website. People were asked to rate the appropriateness of the photos. Those primed with the R set were more likely to rate highly the appropriateness of the common photos, while those primed with the PG set were more likely to rate the appropriateness lower. On top of that, a questionnaire with questions ranging from non-invasive and mundane to highly invasive and private were asked to participants. The participants were asked if they would answer the question or skip it. They would either choose to answer or skip on their own behalf, on behalf of another fictional person with a provocative personality, or on behalf of someone else who avoids provocative behavior. In the questionnaire, people were less likely to skip questions if they were primed with the R-rated set. This is a clear-cut and powerful example of nudging people to make decisions. The choice architects primed people with the status quo and utilized people's bias to do what they see others doing to increase their willingness to disclose private information. Let's move on to utilizing nudge theory to impact engineering decision-making. In the case of engineering decision-making, oftentimes the choice architect may be the engineer making the decisions. The engineer does not necessarily know exactly what decision will be the best possible decision. They may know what the final product should be capable of, but that does not mean that every decision along the way is something that will be a certain decision. In fact, there's a great amount of uncertainty in engineering decision making. This means that the engineer, who will be the choice architect, desires to nudge themselves or their team towards the best possible decision, not towards a specific decision, as we've seen in previous examples like the cafeteria or the social media site. One set of research papers examines utilizing nudge theory to encourage construction contractors away from choosing jobs with greater unknowns, uncertainty, and risk. The two journal articles that are over this topic gave participants the scenario that a student competition was deciding to build housing on one of two sites, a vacant building or an empty lot. The students had already set up a trade-off matrix for each alternative. The study participants were asked which option seemed more appealing in their opinion, based on the trade-off matrices. The control group was given trade-off matrices that included flexibility, delivery, speed, sustainability, affordability, spatial and social quality, and risk and uncertainties as consequences for each option. A rating of -2 is the worst, and a rating of +2 is the best. The experimental group was given trade-off matrices that removed the risk and uncertainty row and placed a 95% confidence interval into each of the other consequences, embedding risk within the five important consequences. Both papers came to the same conclusion and had very similar results, including an arguably more clear representation of risk in the experimental set led participants to more often choose the safer and less attractive option. This is a clear example of the effectiveness of using framing to nudge decision makers. So, what lessons can engineers take away from all this information? Well, first of all, systems engineers who are defining the architecture for a system need to be very well aware of the wording that they use when writing system requirements. Changes in wording may be an intentional or unintentional nudge for design engineers. Being intentional with the consequences of the way a requirement is framed is important. Additionally, ensuring that realistic anchors are set and that bias towards a particular detailed architecture is left out. If systems engineers develop bias into their requirements, it may lead a design engineer to develop a suboptimal system. At the same time, it may be beneficial to utilize framing in system requirements to cause the design engineer to view the problem from multiple perspectives, rather than relying on the design engineer's experience to view it themselves from multiple perspectives. One behavior that engineers can bear in mind as they design a system is the human bias to stick with the status quo. It can be tempting when creating a new iteration of a system to not change things. The well-known phrase of, "if it ain't broke, don't fix it," speaks to this belief. But it may be necessary to modify what is working now to make room for new future system capabilities. If that is the goal of a particular project, the lead engineers may want to nudge the team to begin thinking of new ideas to improve the existing system. The design meetings to discuss new design ideas can be another place that engineers can utilize an awareness of nudge theory. Junior engineers may be afraid to speak up and go against what more senior engineers are suggesting due to the spotlight effect. Senior engineers might be primed by their own years of experience and doing things a certain way. This can make it difficult to innovate for some groups of engineers. An awareness of this behavior and ensuring the junior engineers get involved to present new and fresh ideas can only benefit a group of engineers. If the junior engineers present good ideas, then the project will be benefited. If they present poorly thought out ideas, then they will learn from the experience, and the suggestion may spark some idea in a more senior engineer's mind that they would not have thought of before. Ensuring that an engineering team is a collaborative environment through nudging the teams towards collaboration will help ensure that the best possible end product is created. To sum all of this up, it is important for any decision maker to realize the human bias that can enter a decision situation. It's important to ensure that the problem is viewed from multiple perspectives, that the risk and other uncertainties are properly framed, and that the influence of other people on a decision situation is positive and not preventative. All of this comes with a general knowledge of nudge theory and human bias. All it takes is the choice architect or decision maker stepping back and reflecting on these concepts prior to making any important decisions. I hope that this knowledge helps you in your future decision making, engineering or otherwise. Thanks for listening.